Yo, what is going on everyone, XpertFusion here, and today I have the final Call of Duty retrospective review for you guys, and of course that is for Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019. So I've been doing this retrospective review series for about a year and a half. I started it back in May of 2019, and I've been kind of just going through, taking it, a couple months at a time to review a Call of Duty in its entirety, meaning I go back to it, I play it as much as humanly possible throughout the entirety of the mode, campaign, multiplayer, and any third modes that the game has, and just getting a good feel for it so I can make a final opinion, current opinion on the game, of course. And maybe at some point in the future I will do this again, but that would be way down the line because of course opinions change over time, and my quality of my content has also gotten better over time as well. Back in 2019, early 2019, my quality wasn't as good, I feel like, that it is now, so I could definitely possibly redo some of those in the future. I usually like to wait until the game is completely finished with all its DLC and updates to actually do this review, but Modern Warfare is a special case. We don't really know exactly when they'll stop updating it. They clearly are still updating it. There's more guns, more maps in the files, so we're still going to see some more things added for Modern Warfare. But I'm just going to, do this review as the game is currently, and of course as it's been throughout the past year, meaning not just about how it is now, but the state of the game throughout October of 2019 all the way up until now, of course, November 2020. So they've had about, what, 13 months for this game? That is a long time to be able to get a good feel for a game, so I feel like my opinion on this game is pretty much set in stone, and my opinion on this game is very, very interesting. There's some parts about this game that I absolutely love, and I think it's some of the best stuff in the COD franchise, and then there's other parts of this game that I think is some of the worst stuff from the Call of Duty franchise ever. And as a whole, I do think this game to me is a successful failure. Now, what do I mean by that? Simple. On one hand, this game was a massive success, objectively speaking, in terms of financial success, in terms of the player retention. This is the most popular Call of Duty of all time. It is the most sold, it is the most played, and you can thank a lot of different things for that, like, for example, the free-to-play nature of Warzone, of course the inclusion of Warzone as a whole, but even before that, just going back to the Modern Warfare title, having Price in there with the campaign, having a multiplayer that was more grounded and more, military-like, that brought a lot of old school players back to play. And then also the pandemic, of course, played a big part in players coming back and playing, especially throughout the March to May sort of time period. So this game is incredibly successful. There's no doubting that. So objectively speaking, yes, it is successful. But subjectively speaking, I think this game is a straight up failure. And that is exactly what we are going to be talking about in today's video, my own subjective opinions. Because whether or not you think a game is good or bad, that is up to your own opinion. Don't ever let someone tell you objectively something's good or objectively something's bad. No, it is always going to be up to preference, and that is what we are here to talk about. Of course, we're going to go through every single mode: campaign, multiplayer, Spec Ops, and Warzone. I was really debating on whether or not I should include Warzone, because technically Warzone isn't really only tied to Modern Warfare now, it's also being tied to Black Ops Cold War. So what I thought made the most sense would be to kind of just review Warzone from its Modern Warfare era, and then when Black Ops Cold War comes around, we'll review Warzone through the Black Ops era of Warzone, because of course they're going to be changing the map a little bit here and there, and they'll be adding the Black Ops Cold War guns to Warzone as well. So they're just going to be doing a lot of things that'll change up Warzone and make it feel more integrated with Black Ops Cold War. But since Warzone has been part of the Modern Warfare application for quite some time, it only made sense to at least count it for a certain portion of this review, because I do think Warzone was like one of the only things keeping Modern Warfare alive, and to this day I still think it is one of the only things keeping Modern Warfare alive for many different players in the community, because Warzone is absolutely massive. So let's just get right to it, starting off with the campaign. So of course, one of the best parts of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019 was the campaign. I think the campaign in this game is absolutely phenomenal. Not one of the better ones in the franchise, like I wouldn't put it within the top 3 because we've had some phenomenal ones before, but it was still absolutely incredible. I think majority of the COD campaigns have been pretty solid. At the end of the day, the storylines in these campaigns are never really that incredible. Like, you're lying to me if you think COD campaigns have the best stories out there. I'd say Black Ops 1 and 2 have some pretty solid stories, but for the most part, the stories are never all that intriguing. They're usually just generic war stories, but that's not what we love them for. We don't love them for the story usually. We usually love them for the characters and the story that's going on within those specific characters with the greater universe that they're a part of. that is what we are attached to, and that's what we care about, because at the end of the day, they're not trying to do something, you know, absolutely crazy and innovative with the formula of a war story. No, it's trying to go through what a war story would normally be like, and it plays out relatively well. They're not trying to do anything crazy. And this game definitely does not try to do anything above and beyond what the COD campaigns usually do, but they kind of perfect it. They perfect what the original Modern Warfare franchise was doing within their games. I don't think it's better than Modern Warfare 2. I don't think it's better than Modern Warfare 3, but they definitely have some amazing features and things about this campaign that definitely put it above Modern Warfare 2 and 3 in certain aspects, specifically the graphics, the sounds, and the animations. I would say those three factors are absolutely phenomenal in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019. They nail the graphics, the sounds, and the animations. Now, this goes for the entirety of the game, to be completely honest, but I only really care about it within the campaign because that's where it actually matters. That's where you want to feel immersed into the story and into the universe, and you're only going to get that if everything feels real, and the guns feel and sound real. They look pretty real as well. They're the most realistic COD experience I think we've had when it comes to the campaign, which I think is important there. For multiplayer, I'm not really down for a realistic experience. I'd prefer much more of a fun arcade shooter type experience, but the campaign, when you have realistic feeling weapons and realistic looking character models, it is going to be much more immersive and therefore much more enjoyable, at least in my personal opinion. But just because I want realism in terms of the guns and such does not mean I want the whole story and the whole plot lines to be that incredibly realistic, because let's be real here, real war is usually not that entertaining. It doesn't have fast-paced action shooting up, you know, people in these like crazy locations. It usually doesn't have these crazy Call of Duty epic moments that you would normally have, and I'm glad this campaign doesn't take those moments away.
I can't get it. No time!
But it also doesn't have nearly as many of those moments as what like Modern Warfare 2 and Modern Warfare 3 did, which is a little bit unfortunate. I love the two different stories that are going on in the beginning of this game, where you have the missions with Price and Kyle, and then you also have the missions with Alex and Farah, and you're kind of going through these different stories, and then they kind of connect once you get to the embassy mission. And I gotta say, there are some great missions in the first half of this game. Piccadilly, the second mission in the game, one of the best missions in COD history. Then you have Clean House, another one of the best missions in COD history, where you're literally going through this house and you're literally taking out people one by one. And it's really awesome because you actually have to make these choices when you have like a civilian pulling out a gun on you and you have to shoot this woman, and it makes you kind of feel things because you're like, wow, I just shot this woman, I just shot possibly someone innocent, but they grabbed a gun, you had to. Then you see the woman with the baby and you have to make sure you're not accidentally shooting them, because that's real, that's what happens in war, and that makes you think, that makes you feel things, and that's what is, in my opinion, what these campaigns should be doing. They should be making you think a little bit, not just going around shooting people endlessly, because there are consequences to what you do in war, and I think this game did a great job of showing that, because they don't, you know, penalize you all the time, unless obviously you shoot the baby. That they don't let that happen, because, you know, it's a video game. I guess they don't want too much of that craziness happening, but if you accidentally shoot a woman who you're not even supposed to shoot, it won't say, you know, failed mission, don't shoot civilian. It'll literally just let you kill the woman, and you just accidentally shot this woman who wasn't even trying to reach for her gun. It just plays it out like that, because that's a consequence of war, and now you have to sit with that. Now, of course, it's a video game. You're not gonna sit there with, you know, PTSD because you accidentally shot this woman. It's a video game, but it still makes you think a little bit, and it definitely puts you in a more immersive position in the story, which I definitely appreciate, and that's something I love about this game. And overall, just the terrorism that goes on in this game is real. It's real, and it makes you emotional, and that is what a campaign should be. They should have emotion there. Like, for example, the mission when you're playing as young Farah and you're running through this place, you're seeing all these innocent people getting shot. It's not easy to see, you know. It's not any like No Russian from Modern Warfare 2. It's not as crazy as that, but it definitely still has some value to it, where it's making you kind of emotional about it, you know what I mean? And I gotta say, those flashback missions were incredible, because I love the attention to detail they have with the weapons. They had another one where you're playing as Farah, a little bit younger, but she wasn't, you know, that young, and you were using an AK-47, and it made you actually reload the gun a little bit slower, and you had a little more recoil, because it made sense. She's not trained with a weapon, she's going to be a little bit less efficient with it. And they did the same when you were using the little Magnum when she was, a child, and it was hard to shoot the thing. And I really like the attention to detail they put into this campaign. That's where I really care about attention to detail, because it really just makes it feel more, like I said, immersive and real, and that's what this campaign does perfectly. This is usually a positive for the majority of COD campaigns, but it's got to be the soundtrack. The soundtrack here is absolutely incredible again, just like it was in Infinite Warfare. Infinite Warfare has a great soundtrack as well. I think the Infinity Ward campaigns tend to really have great soundtracks, so that's definitely a huge positive to this campaign. I would say the biggest negative I have for the campaign, though, is the fact that the locations you're fighting at get kind of boring because you're fighting in the same general places for the majority of the campaign. This is the same problem I have with the multiplayer maps. They don't really go outside the boundaries of these couple different countries. Like you're fighting in, the Urkistan place, and then you're fighting in Verdansk for a little bit, and you're fighting in, it's just like Middle East, and then you got a couple places in Russia. There's 1 or 2 missions in the UK. There's not a lot of diversity in where you're at. Look at like Modern Warfare 2 and 3, for example. You go everywhere in those games. Modern Warfare 3, you're literally in, you're in America, you're in Germany, you're in France, you're in so many different places. It makes the game feel more unique as you're going through the missions, but in this game, it doesn't really feel that unique when you're going through the missions because you're generally speaking staying in the same places. And I get that's to serve the purpose of the story. They're not going to go outside the boundaries of what the story is about. I hope the Modern Warfare sequel goes outside the boundaries a little bit and at least tries to explore some other places, because it does get kind of boring being in the same couple places. And although I was pretty skeptical at first of this whole reboot thing they're doing with the Modern Warfare franchise, I come to realize that it actually makes perfect sense and there really is nothing too bad about it. I just hope they don't try to replicate too much of the original franchise, and I think they did a good job of making it its own thing with just keeping some of the original characters returning, like Price, for example. You didn't return too many original characters, but I feel like Modern Warfare 2 is going to throw in a lot of them, like Ghost, Soap. I wouldn't be surprised if all of them come in, and if they do it right, I'll be okay with it. I do think an original story with completely new characters would have been a little bit better, but it does at least give us some of those iconic feels, because Price is a badass in this campaign. I think the new actor does a great job of portraying Price. Honestly, in some ways, I like him even more than the original Price. So this campaign is fantastic, one of my favorites, but I think those few different flaws I had with it definitely bring it down just a little bit. I'm going to give it an 18 out of 20, which is really a good score. It's a great score, but it's not perfect, just not there yet. Yeah, so I'm gassing up this game so far, and let's get to the portion of the game that I absolutely hate, and that is the multiplayer. I'll be honest, I think Modern Warfare's multiplayer might be my least favorite multiplayer in the main Call of Duty franchise, going from COD 4 to, Modern Warfare. I think it might be my least favorite one, and I was really hoping that wasn't going to be the case back when we got the game after the beta and after launch, but as time went on, I started not liking it more and more and more. I wouldn't go as far as to say it's the worst thing to, hit mankind or anything, because it's not that terrible. There are some great things about it that we will go over, but a lot of it to me is just so painfully just bad that it ruins the experience for me, and I really have trouble having fun within this game. And of course, it's subjective, it's my opinion. I'm not saying objectively you have to hate this game. If you don't, you're wrong. Of course not. This is just my opinion, and hopefully you guys can like it. I would prefer people liking a game than not liking it, because that's just, that's how I am. I like positivity more than negativity. But when I play something and I really don't like it, I have to share my thoughts on why I don't like it, and I've kind of come to understand exactly why I don't like it, and that's the reasons we're going to be going over today. So Infinite Warfare, Black Ops 4, World War II were all cases of me liking the game more over time, but this game was just been the opposite. I've started to dislike it over time more and more, and I think it's because I kept expecting the DLCs and stuff to be updating the game in a positive way, but it really hasn't been. They've just been adding some new maps that aren't really that great, or remaking old maps that some of them are great, some of them aren't. Bringing back old guns, some of them cool, some of them not so much. It's really just a case of I don't think they're going to update the game in the way I want, so there's no point in me sitting around and trying to expect it, because I remember back in like November or December of last year, I was expecting some big overhaul where they were going to fix all the problems I had with the game, and we never got that. So I never really felt like the game was able to do what World War II did, for me at least, where it completely changed the experience just from a massive overhaul update. So we might as well just get the positives out of the way because there are a few positives for Modern Warfare's multiplayer. The main thing being the brand new DLC model in terms of having free DLC, having, of course, the battle pass and no more supply drops, no more guns stuck in supply drops only. There is a bad thing about this system though, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But overall, I do think this new DLC model is a great change for the COD franchise, and although I can't really give Infinity Ward credit for it because I don't really think it has anything to do with them, I think Activision just had a change of heart, it still does impact this game and make it a little bit more enjoyable because now I can actually just get all the DLC guns available to me without having to rely on luck or even grinding the game out like you would have to in most of the other recent Call of Duties. I do like having them, pretty soon. I didn't think it was a big deal in like World War II and stuff because you could still earn them relatively easily, Infinite Warfare as well, but I do think overall this is a great change for the franchise, especially having free DLC maps, because then now everyone can play them at the same time. I don't have to worry about people being like, oh, I don't have the DLC, or as time goes on, the lobbies get slimmer and slimmer because the player base is very split up. You know what I mean? You have some people who have DLC, some people who don't, and that makes it so it's kind of hard to get into lobbies for DLC maps later on down the line. But now we're never gonna have a problem with that. The DLC maps are always gonna be available. But I do think this free DLC model has impacted the DLC negatively in other aspects. And what I mean by that is we've only gotten 5 brand new DLC maps, and we've already through the entirety of the Modern Warfare cycle. We've only gotten 5. Now, of course, there's been other maps, but they've either been ripped straight from Warzone or they've been taken from previous Call of Duty games like remakes and such. And to me, that's kind of pathetic. I mean, compare that to how many new maps we get in other Call of Duty games. It's usually like at least 12 or so DLC maps that are new. So I'm not a big person who's going to be a stickler on quantity. I care more about quality, but those 5 new DLC maps weren't really all that great anyways, so there isn't much quality there either. But we'll get into maps a little bit later. And a big negative that comes from this new microtransaction system is the fact that the majority of skins in this game are now only locked behind paywalls, and there's no free way of earning them. I would prefer there be some free way to earn them, whether it be a massive grind or something, but it's really unfortunate because I love grinding out for camos and such in Call of Duty games. I love having stuff to grind for it, even if it's based on luck. I don't really care because it's cosmetics. I really wouldn't mind supply drops in this game if they were cosmetic only. I would see absolutely no issue with that, like zero issue. But if they're not going to be there, at least give us some way to earn cosmetics for free. I know there's some stuff in the battle pass that's free. There's a couple different things you could earn in other different ways, like the recent Halloween event give you a free Grau blueprint. But for the most part, the coolest stuff is stuck in that shop for really expensive prices. Like, it's insanely overpriced. I'm not buying a $24 skin. You think I'm going to buy a $24 skin? Y'all are crazy. So I'm not a big fan of the microtransaction system, even though as a whole it is better off because we do get the DLC maps for free, and we also do get the guns relatively for free, and we don't have to worry about them being locked behind drops. That's the only positive about it, though. Everything else about it I really don't like, so that's a big issue. Another positive about Modern Warfare would have to be the amount of game modes they have available, and specifically the ground war and gunfight modes that they added. Gunfight, in my opinion, is the best part of Modern Warfare's multiplayer. Like, honestly, out of every single thing you can do within the multiplayer, gunfight to me is the best and well-rounded experience that there is to offer. Now, to me, it's only really enjoyable with friends, though. If you're playing with a buddy, if you're by yourself, it can get kind of boring because your teammate might suck and it kind of ruins the experience a little bit. But if you're playing with a buddy, gunfight is a lot of fun, especially when they had the gunfight tournaments available where there was actually a reward at the end where you got a blueprint weapon. Those tournaments were some of the most fun I've had in Modern Warfare because gunfight is just such a cool mode. You get these random weapons every 2 rounds and you have them switched up like that, and you get 1 life per round. It's a very solid mode. I'm really glad it's returning in Black Ops Cold War. And then ground war to me is really fun, but snipers ruin it. It really just depends on the lobby you're in. If you're in a really fun lobby where everyone's moving around and actually playing the objective and such, it can actually be kind of fun. But I feel like most of the time, especially on some of the maps with the really tall buildings like the downtown map, it's just way too annoying because people are just sitting up there with snipers, and snipers have like barely any bullet drop within ground war, so they could just snipe you across the map, and it just gets kind of frustrating. And then like tanks and stuff in some of the maps are really frustrating as well. So ground war had a lot of potential. It's still nice to have it there as an option, but in my opinion it's kind of been tainted by a couple different play styles that you can do within Ground War. And the 10v10 modes has also been really cool. It makes sense, you know, if you're going to give us bigger maps in some of the 6v6 modes, some of the standard modes, might as well make them 10v10. I'm really glad they did that because a lot of the maps would not work with 6v6. Like, for example, Euphrates Bridge, a couple of other ones that really only do work for 10v10, a Granza Raid, which I think is actually a pretty good map. But we'll get into the maps later, of course. I have a lot to say about that. And then the last thing I want to say about the positives is the guns feel good. Just like what I was saying with campaign, the guns are awesome in this game. I would say they feel good, they sound good, and I dig the realistic vibe of them, although I don't dig the realistic vibes of other portions of this game, and we'll obviously get into that in a little bit. And actually, one last thing, I do like the Gunsmith. We're going to talk more about create a class later and the Gunsmith system because there's a lot more negatives I have with Gunsmith, which might be an unpopular opinion, but I do like the idea of Gunsmith, how you can basically change your weapon into becoming a completely different type of weapon. It does add a lot of replay value when you have a lot of different attachments to mess with. I do definitely like that a lot. Let's get into the negatives. Let's just destroy this game. Let's try to do it as quickly as possible. First things first, skill-based matchmaking. I don't have to say much more about that. I'm not going to go on and on about how terrible skill-based matchmaking is, but in this COD, it is the worst it's ever been, and that's a huge, huge problem. I hope it's not going to be just as bad in Cold War as it is in Modern Warfare, because it really does ruin the experience when you're being put in the same lobbies with the same type of people. And to kind of add on to skill-based matchmaking, another thing that they did was no map voting and the lobbies not staying together. I do think these two factors have to do with skill-based matchmaking, and it's, in my opinion, really frustrating. Next up, the time to kill is just way too damn fast. I've mentioned this many times. I prefer a slower time to kill over a faster time to kill. I don't mind if it's like in the middle, but this game is just way too fast. I feel like you get killed from behind way too often, and players who are definitely not better than you at the game can laser you across the map pretty easily with like any gun in the game. Like the MP7 can literally laser beam anybody across the map because the time to kill is relatively fast, and I really am against that. It, to me, is one of the biggest problems I have with this game. It makes the gameplay loop feel a little bit stale because you're just constantly getting killed from angles that you have no control over, and I just don't like that. And next up, we got to talk about the maps, man. These are some of the worst maps in Call of Duty history. And in terms of not only their design, but also their spawns and the looks. The looks of these maps, they're pretty ugly for the most part. They all stay within the same general locations. You don't get any interesting places except for a couple different maps, like Piccadilly is a pretty cool place. But in terms of map design, I can't think of more than like 3 or 4 maps that are actually well designed in this game. My issue with them is that there's just way too many safe spaces, there's way too many flanking routes, and there's way too many random spawns. These maps don't have flow to it. It's like they put you in a realistic atmosphere, that's true, but realistic atmospheres and locations don't really make for good Call of Duty maps. I mean, they really don't. Of course, they make you feel like you're more so fighting in real life as opposed to fighting in an arena, but this is an arcade shooter. We should be fighting in arena-like landscapes that have well-defined lanes and actually have decent flow to them. These maps don't feel like they have any flow. They're very random. There's way too many buildings, way too many windows, way too many places to just go in and out of areas, so you never really can predict where the enemies are coming from, which makes it feel more random. And then add on the fast time to kill, you get shot in the back a lot. So you'd think, oh yeah, map knowledge should just be very important in this game, which is to a degree somewhat true, but the spawns are so bad to the point where there really isn't even much map knowledge to be had because you can't even really predict the spawns because the spawn system is just all over the place. They had this new like squad spawn system. It makes no sense. You have people spawning literally 2 feet from you sometimes because it's just how the spawns are in this game. I mean, especially on the smaller maps, Shoot House and Shipment specifically, you literally have people spawning inside of you practically. It's just way too hectic. It's way too all over the place. And then you have moments where there's no one even spawning within any general vicinity of you because the maps are pretty big for some of the different game modes. Obviously, Shoot House and Shipment are the exceptions. They're very small maps, but some of the big ones, sometimes you'll just never find anyone because they're spawning so far away and they don't flip the spawns when you start getting into positions where they should be flipping. They're just all over the place, and I've noticed this. I'm not the only one who've noticed this. I'm pretty sure many other people have noticed this as well, so I'm probably not the only one who thinks this, but I can't think of a single map in this game that would deserve to be anywhere near the top 50 best maps of all time, to be completely honest. The only really solid maps in this game, I would say, are maybe like Gun Runner. I think Granza Raid has some decent parts to it. I think Hackney Yard is okay, but none of them are like incredible is what I'm trying to say. Having kill streaks by default was a huge mistake because not only does this create a discouragement to play the objective, so people don't really care to play the objective, but it also just encourages camping. No one really feels the need to hop on a flag or an objective because they're not going to get rewarded for it for the streaks. Yes, you can win the game, but most people don't really care about winning games. I mean, if you've met the COD community, you know no one really cares about the objective. They only seem to really care about it when there are rewarded score for their streaks. So score streaks should be the default. They just should be. And the fact that it's a perk instead is just really stupid because it's in a perk category where there's very good perks in there as well. So you're not going to want to give up a perk slot just to have something that should be already in the game by default. Terrible decision. I'm not happy with that. The mounting is one of the stupidest mechanics I think COD has ever added because it literally gives your guns zero recoil practically. So you can laser beam people across the map with guns that do not have the type of capabilities normally, and that completely just takes away balance in the game at all if you get in the right position. And that also encourages camping again, and the fact that there's literally a challenge for Damascus camo that you have to get like 100 something kills with every gun while mounting, that all it does is just encourage people to mount even more. You know how frustrating it is getting killed across the map by somebody who's mounting in a window and you have nothing you can do about it because they're basically head glitching in that spot and they have little to no recoil on that specific weapon that they're using, and they could literally laser beam you across the map like that and they're not even moving at all. So it's just terrible. Having no prestige system was also a massive failure in my opinion because it doesn't show your progress over time to other players like directly, so you just kind of see your progress between that specific season, but no one really cares about your progress that season. I want to see how much they've progressed throughout the entirety of the lifespan of that game, and the fact that it's just tied to the seasons and you get reset after each season is just so boring. You should have done some sort of prestige system, something that at least shows how much you've played throughout time as what levels are supposed to do. I absolutely despise that. And the creative class system, although Gunsmith was cool and I like the idea they had with it, I think Gunsmith needed a lot of work, and I'm glad that Cold War expanded upon it because a lot of the attachments were just stupid and like useless. It was like no point in using a lot of the attachments that you had available to your weapons because they were just so terrible. They were practically making your gun worse in some cases. And two, they weren't specific about what was actually changing on your gun. It made it really confusing for players to learn what the hell is it actually changing on your gun. You had to look up drifter videos to actually really understand what's actually being changed on your weapon with these specific attachments. That was frustrating. And then besides Gunsmith, the creative class system as a whole just sucks. It's the same old creative class system we had back in from COD 4 all the way to Modern Warfare 3, where you're forced to have a primary, you're forced to have a secondary, you're forced to have a specific amount of attachments, you're forced to have one of each perk category, you're forced to have equipment. I hate this because it takes away customization. Pick 10 was great because it gave us options. It let us mix and match our perks and our attachments and what we have on our classes, and you don't need equipment, so guess what? That stops equipment spam. Equipment spam is a big problem in this game. There's claymores everywhere. There's grenades being tossed everywhere. Semtexes, concussions, everything. There's just so many grenades and equipment. If you give us pick 10 or the option to at least get rid of our equipment for something else, you will see less equipment spam, which is always a great thing because equipment spam ruins COD experiences for me. I'm really worried about how that's going to pertain to Cold War because there's just way too many equipment being thrown around. It takes no skill to throw a grenade in a room and get kills with it. It should be something that you put in your class and now you get less of something else, or you don't use it and then you get more of something else. That's how it should be. To me, Gunsmith could easily have been worked with pick 10. There was no reason to completely remove the pick 10 system just for Gunsmith. They could have made a hybrid of some sort, and I don't even think Cold War's hybrid is all that great either, to be completely honest. And one final thing I want to mention for Modern Warfare's multiplayer is the visibility is terrible. I hate how hard it is to see people across the maps, especially on the ground war maps in this game, because the colors are so gray and gross. Now the graphics are great, don't get me wrong there. The graphics are fantastic, but the colors are so gray that it makes it almost impossible to see enemy players across the map. There's honestly probably a few things I'm missing out on, but I don't want to get too into it because it's just gonna take me way too long. So I'm going to give Modern Warfare's multiplayer a 13 out of 35. I know that is a terrible score, but it's getting 13 points for just overall being a really good looking game, and the game modes they have, how the guns feel, some of the gunsmith features and mechanics that they have, and the new DLC model as a whole, I think is definitely a positive. So Modern Warfare multiplayer definitely gets some credit there, but everything else about it I despise. Therefore, it gets a really crappy score of 13 out of 35. Now, Spec Ops, I'm going to give a 0 out of 10. That's all we have to talk about for that. No, I'm just kidding. We'll actually talk about Spec Ops a little bit. There's not really much to say though, because A, I haven't played Spec Ops too much, but I did definitely hop into it to at least give it a chance, but there really just isn't much to it, to the point where there isn't much I can really talk about. I tried Spec Ops out at launch and I hated it, but I wanted to kind of give it a fair chance for this review, so I went back and played some of the different stuff to it, and it wasn't as bad as it was at launch, but I still don't really care for it at all, to be honest. And I think the problem with Spec Ops is the fact that it was our third mode for like 6 months. Now I feel like Warzone kind of took that place of being the third mode of the game, but Spec Ops for at least 6 months was the third mode that we had, so we were expecting it to be on par with stuff like zombies and extinction from the past. I mean, you compare Spec Ops to every other third mode from the current gen CODs, from Ghosts all the way up to Modern Warfare, it stands no chance. Extinction even had way more than this. All the zombies modes that we've had, they have more unique feels to it. They're very different. They're very inspiring, you know what I mean? This isn't inspiring. This is literally just using a map that they were going to use for Warzone anyways, so they said screw it, let's just put in some not really even fun missions in there just for players to mess around with. I mean, for starters, Spec Ops was broken at launch. I remember trying to play it at launch. It was unplayable. Like, a lot of the modes and stuff were just not something you could even complete successfully because it was either glitched, bugged, or the enemies were just way too difficult for what they should be. I know they patched some stuff up and it's not nearly as buggy as it is today, but it's just not fun. That's like the biggest part about it. It's not enjoyable. It doesn't have that fun factor that zombies and extinction has, because you're just fighting AI bots. You know, you're fighting the same type of enemies that you fight in campaign and multiplayer. It doesn't feel unique. It doesn't feel different than what we're playing in the other modes. There's no unique weapons or unique items. It's literally just using the same stuff for multiplayer, but fighting against bots. I think this is a cool thing to have in the game, just for like a side, mode, but as our third mode, no, it's just not a fun third mode to have, and I think they could have done some more things with it. Maybe included zombies in it somehow, maybe included some PvPvE modes, which actually was leaked and they were planning on doing that, but apparently it was scrapped. That's according to the Gaming Revolution, so that could have been cool if they had some PvPvE modes, which what that means is it's basically just like ground war where there's like giant team battles, but they have bots mixed into it, so you have, maybe like objectives that you have to do. You have to take out certain enemies and do it in certain ways. They could have done a lot more, to be honest, with Spec Ops, and I think it could have been a lot better, but the way it was built, the way it was made, it has no replay value to me. Therefore, it's just not a solid experience. I do like the open world feel to it. It was cool, playing on it at first because it was new to us. We didn't play the Warzone map at the time when we were playing Spec Ops. We didn't even know it was going to be for Warzone. I assumed it was, but we didn't know that for sure. So it was cool playing on it the first couple of months, just seeing the different locations on the map and such, and just exploring a little bit. And I do appreciate the rewards you get for completing some of the stuff. Some of the blueprints you get are kind of cool for some of the Spec Ops missions, but I really couldn't care less about trying to go for them because I already don't like this game that much, so there's that. So I'm gonna give Spec Ops a 3 out of 10, and I'm so harsh on it only because, like I said, it's supposed to be our third mode in the game. If they advertise it as being something like just extra, like something on top of maybe a zombies mode or something, I don't think I would be as harsh on it, and it would probably get a higher score. Well, actually, it probably wouldn't even be much of a part of the game, but considering it was our third mode for a long time, I have to give it, it's part of the game. And to me, because it's such a failure of a mode, it does bring down the score of this game substantially. So 3 out of 10 is what I'm going to give to Spec Ops. Now we're going to be getting into the interesting stuff here, ladies and gentlemen, and that is, of course, Warzone. So Warzone saved Modern Warfare for me. It really did. If Warzone did not happen, Modern Warfare would go down in history as, in my opinion, the worst Call of Duty of all time. But Warzone puts it a little bit higher. It puts it above a couple of other Call of Duty games just because of Warzone being as damn fun and replayable as it is. I would go down and say this is definitely the best Battle Royale of all time. Better than Fortnite, better than PUBG, better than Apex. I think it is the best and most well-refined BR of all time. There are a lot of problems with it, and we'll get into that, but for the most part, it plays out incredibly well, and the Modern Warfare mechanics and systems almost feel like they were made for BR rather than made for 6v6 multiplayer. First of all, the fact that it was free to play was a huge deal because that got a lot of players who maybe were a little bit skeptical about buying the full game to kind of get invested in what Modern Warfare is all about, and that was great for their own sales of the game, but also just for replayability because there were so many more people playing and invested in Warzone just because they know they didn't have to buy the full game to get it. Like a lot of my friends who weren't planning on buying COD this year were actually able to play the new COD with me because they were playing Warzone, and they did these free-to-play multiplayer events every now and then to kind of get them to play multiplayer a little bit just every now and then, and that's nice. I like that. Free-to-play is a great thing for companies to do, of course, as long as they don't, abuse their monetization systems, which I still feel like they kind of did in this game, but regardless, I do think that having it free-to-play was huge, not just for the success, but also for my own personal enjoyment of it. A lot of the systems and mechanics of Warzone are fantastic, like the gulag and the buyback system. It keeps all players invested in the game till the end. A big problem I had with Fortnite before they introduced the reboot cards was obviously the fact that you couldn't come back if you died. If you spawn in with your teams, you drop at Tilted Towers, and when you die and your team goes on the rest of the game and they win it, you're going to be sitting there for 20 minutes just staring at them playing, and that's terrible. Warzone allows you to have not only another chance in the gulag, but also the ability for your team to buy you back through the buy stations, so you're always invested in the game no matter what. You're always sitting there being like, okay, my team can still bring me back, so I'm still invested in the game, and that is huge. A big problem with Blackout, also the fact that you couldn't come back in that if you died, so it made team play really just not there, and I preferred solos completely because I just didn't like the fact that if I die in the first couple seconds, I'm out for the rest of the game, and there's no going back for me, obviously, unless you play Alcatraz, which is the reason why Alcatraz was so much fun in Blackout. The whole money system and how you can buy stuff in the buy station, not just buying your teammates back, but all the different things you can buy. I actually kind of like the loadouts a little bit. I know some people don't, but I think the loadouts are interesting because it actually makes your customization before game actually somewhat useful, so you can use whatever type of items you want that you unlocked through Create a Class in there, which actually makes unlocking attachments for guns and such and unlocking camos actually worth it, because if it was just a loot in the map and it had nothing to do with your actual guns itself, then it wouldn't really matter about what variants you get or blueprints is what they call it, or what attachments you unlock, because they're just going to be on the guns anyways. So I really do like the loadout system because of that. I like a lot of the other features they have, like the different kill streaks, which they're not too powerful. I think the vehicles are pretty, balanced. I don't think they're anything too crazy about them. Some of the map features they included, like the train, for example, I really, really dig the train. I think the train was the coolest thing they added, to be completely honest. And the armor system is actually really good. It's pretty simplistic, and I actually like that you actually auto regen your health as opposed to not having to do that and then having to consistently bandage yourself like you do in other BRs. I actually like just automatically healing right away. There's only really a few issues I have with Warzone. One of the big ones obviously being skill-based matchmaking, which is the same for multiplayer. Still hate skill-based matchmaking. The map itself, I'm not a big fan of. I'll be completely honest. I actually prefer the Blackout map a little bit, and I'll explain why. The map to me is just really bland and boring. It's got a lot of things to it, a lot more than what Blackout had, but the locations themselves just aren't really fun, except for a couple different places, but they're not really fun to explore and look through, not only because the majority of the map is just the same recycled locations. Like, you could find the same building like 30 times over on the map, and it's just like, it's way too much. I know Blackout did the same thing, but they didn't do it nearly as much as what Warzone does. You just consistently get the same building over and over again, and it makes the locations not feel as unique, and there's not as many iconic Modern Warfare locations as I wish there was. They only have Broadcast, Scrapyard, and Vacant, and I think there might be like one or two other ones. There's just not enough, I think. It would be cooler if we had a lot more iconic locations returning, maybe just from the campaign or from different MP maps. It doesn't really matter to me, but I think it would have been really awesome to see that. There's also just way too many buildings, so there's a lot of places people can camp in, so camping is really massive in this game. People do it all the damn time, and it's a little bit ridiculous, a little bit tedious when just seeing people just camp non-stop, especially when you're in a final circle and they're camping at the top of the building and you're at the bottom. You're pretty much game over for you, to be completely honest, which is always unfortunate. And the map is also way too gray, just like multiplayer. There's not enough color to it, and I'm really excited to see the color that's going to be brought in with this new map, because Cold War is now bringing their assets over into Warzone as well. I think there's going to be a lot more color in this game, hopefully, and it would actually make it a little bit more interesting to look at. And the only other issue I think I have is some of the sound problems with the specifically footsteps are really wonky. Like, footsteps can sometimes sound like they're like 20 feet above you, but then they end up being like 2 feet next to you. It's all over the place sometimes, the footstep audio. This also is the same for multiplayer, but I feel like it's more of an issue in Warzone than it is in multiplayer, so I thought I might as well mention that. And last but not least, there are a lot of hackers and cheating in this game. I personally never ran into it. Actually, I don't think I have. I might have once, but I wasn't too sure. But I've only, seen it happen a lot. And it definitely seems to be a big problem with the game, but personally it hasn't necessarily ruined my experience in really any way, shape, or form. So Warzone as a whole is such a fantastic BR. I can go on and on about how great it is and how much it's going to keep updating over time. I'm really excited to see what they do with it. Warzone saved Modern Warfare. I will say that over and over and over again, even though there's some things about Warzone that I don't like, mainly with how it's kind of affecting the other modes. Like you see Black Ops Cold War Zombies is doing a lot of their mechanics around Warzone. They're trying to appeal to Warzone too much, and I don't know if I'm a big fan of that. MP's doing the same thing. I wouldn't be surprised if Campaign does that as well. But regardless, Warzone's going to get a 32 out of 35 score, which is absolutely huge. That is a fantastic score, and that really helps Modern Warfare have a decent score for this, because otherwise it would have one of the most terrible scores possible if it wasn't for Warzone. So Warzone, you saved that damn game. So for a final verdict of this game, we add up all the scores and we get a 66 out of 100, which is of course 66%. So the only Call of Duties that I've done in this retrospective critical review series that have scored lower than Modern Warfare 2019 have been World at War, Call of Duty Ghosts, and Advanced Warfare. So it actually scored higher than 3 COD games, thanks to Warzone of course, and slightly thanks to the campaign. But everything else about the game just completely shoved it down to being one of my least favorite Call of Duty experiences of all time. And since I'm kind of considering Warzone a different thing now, it doesn't really even feel like part of Modern Warfare. I don't intend on going back to the core Modern Warfare experience anytime soon, other than maybe to check out the campaign in a couple years. Maybe I'll decide to go back to it. And, if we have some new multiplayer updates, I'll probably check it out just to see it, but I probably won't be playing it for much longer than that because I probably just won't be interested in it. So this year for me has been interesting. I haven't really been playing the Modern Warfare experiences that much other than Warzone, so I've kind of just given a lot of time to going back to older Call of Duty games. I went back to Black Ops 4 a lot this year. I actually got Dark Matter in it, played a little bit of Infinite Warfare, World War II, and even some zombies in like BO3 and more classic zombies. I just had some time to reminisce on the COD franchise, so it wasn't a complete failure of a Call of Duty year for me because it just gave me more things to do, and I'm okay with that. So Modern Warfare, hopefully the sequel's better. But yeah, I think it is a successful failure because of course it is a very successful game and I think it deserves it. Call of Duty has been a great franchise for a long time, and it's about time they start to get some recognition for that greatness, or at least more recognition than what they would usually get previously. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Very excited for Black Ops Cold War. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.